These two PCs are the same price, around $1,500. But what if I told you that on average, one of them is 70% faster for gaming? I know, it sounds too good to be true, but this is what happens when you overspend your money in the wrong components. And trust me, I see it happening all the time. But lucky for you, if you stick until the end of this video, this will not happen to you when looking for PC parts. My name is Valentino and today I will show you the perfect 7-step process that you need to follow to buy the right PC for the price if you want to prioritize performance. And I will also show you examples of gaming performance difference, and you will find a lot of valuable information about computers. But I will talk about that in a second. With that being said, let's start. The first step is do not fall for the brand, name or marketing in general. Just because the CPU cooler is from Corsair and is a liquid cooler, it does not mean that it's going to be the best price to performance product for your system. And the same thing happens with every component. Just because it's a Z790 motherboard going for around $230, it doesn't mean that it will give you better gaming performance, or if you have a Samsung Gen 3 SSD. And here not only is about branding but also about the name. Some motherboards have the name Pro in their model name. It does not mean that it will give you higher performance. The only thing that will give you a higher performance is your CPU and GPU combo, and as long as every other component is not bottlenecking these two components, then you are going to be fine. With the second step is prioritizing your GPU and then get a CPU that will not bottleneck it. When it comes to gaming, the highest performance component is going to be the GPU. However, the CPU is quite important as well, because if you are bottlenecking your GPU with your CPU, then you will get lag, stutters and FPS drops. So you can have the RTX 4090, but if you have, for example, an i3 for your CPU, then you are not going to be utilizing that RTX 4090. Also, many people make the mistake of getting a weak CPU that performs amazing, but then get a GPU that's weak. And even though that's not going to make your game lag, you are not going to be achieving the high FPS that you wanted unless your favorite game is very high CPU demanding and it doesn't utilize the GPU that much, which is a rare scenario. With the third step, many people make the mistake of buying a very good graphics card that is total overkill, and you are going to be end up overspending your money, because if you only play, for example, games like Minecraft or CS2 at 1080p, then you do not need a high-end graphics card. And then on the other hand, sometimes people spend too little on the graphics card, making them not achieve the performance that they want. So have an FPS goal in your favorite game and then have a monitor resolution in mind. Are you going to play at 1080p, 1440p or 4K? Because this is quite important when talking about graphics card performance. If you play at higher resolutions, you will need higher end graphics cards to achieve high FPS. For instance, if you want to play at 4K, you need a capable graphics card, especially if your FPS goal is high and depending on the type of games that you want to play. Are they high demanding or are they easy to run? And then with the fourth step, once you have your FPS goal and monitor resolution, compare graphics cards in your favorite games, settings and resolution. You may have a graphics card in mind, for example the RTX 4060 Ti, but you want to compare this GPU with other graphics cards at around the same price, maybe from Nvidia as well or maybe from AMD, and see which graphics card performs better in your game, because that will determine the level of performance that you will get. Now you want to keep other things in mind, such as the power consumption, drivers, the upscaler, ray tracing performance and all of that if you care about it. But if you just care about pure performance, then the frame rate number is going to be the most important metric. Now with the number 5 thing is that most people do not need big and expensive CPU coolers. Listen, if you do not have an i7 14 or 13 gen or an i9, most likely you will be fine with an air cooler. Trust me, if you go with a Ryzen 5 or an i5, you do not need a high-end all-in-one liquid cooler, because it's going to make the system more expensive and you are not going to be getting that much better temps. The most important part when buying a CPU cooler is that you do not thermal throttle your CPU, which means that down the line you are not going to be hurting your CPU, making the gaming PC overall last longer. That being said, I would only recommend liquid coolers if you have a high-end budget and you are going to be buying something like an i7 or i9 or a Ryzen 9 processor. But that depends on the exact model that you are going to buy, because Some Ryzen 7s and Ryzen 9s do not need that much cooling, but if you have a high-end budget and you want to go for aesthetics, then that's going to be completely fine. When it comes to aesthetics, some people say that do not spend a lot of money on the case. I disagree with that, because if you care about aesthetics, then that's going to be fine, but I will talk about that in a second. And before getting into the next step, if you're enjoying the video so far, click the like and subscribe button. It goes a long way, and thank you so much if you end up doing that. With the sixth important thing is that 16 gigs or 32 gigs of RAM is going to be enough for gaming. Now, for most games, 16 gigs of RAM is fine, but 32 gigs of RAM became so cheap that it became my go-to recommendation. Now, if you have a low budget, then by all means go with 16 gigs of RAM, but if you have anything over $750 to $800, then go with 32 gigs of RAM. It became dirty cheap, and it's going to allow you not only a great gaming performance, but it will be also better when it comes to streaming and content creation. Now, anything more than 32 gigs of RAM is overkill for gaming, and you will not be gaining performance. So just because you have 64 gigs of RAM, it doesn't mean that you will achieve higher FPS. You only want to get more than 32 gigs of RAM if you are a professional content creator or you work with programs that do require more than 32 gigs of RAM to be running at a high performance. But when it comes to gaming, 32 gigs of RAM, in my opinion, is the limit, especially when you are trying to get a nice price to performance system. And with the last step is, please do not overspend in PC cases unless aesthetics is a priority for you. As I said before, I'm not against spending a lot of money on PC cases if your goal with the system is aesthetics. Now, if you want just pure performance, then I would not recommend you overspending here. So unless you want a nice aesthetic, and that's a priority, which is totally valid, do not overspend in a case. As you've seen in the beginning, I showed two systems, and I will show you the level of performance for each one of them, because I want to show you an example of what you're losing when you overspend on your system. The first PC has a Ryzen 5 7600 and the RTX 4070 Ti Super for the graphics card. Then you get 32 gigs of DDR5 memory, a B650 motherboard that will allow you to swap to the most high-end gaming CPU in the market, the Ryzen 7 7800X3D, with no issues. Then you have a nice aftermarket CPU cooler, which is really not needed. Then you get a 1TB Gen 4 SSD, a deep cool case, which in my opinion is one of the best looking cases out there, and then you have an NZXT power supply that has plenty of wattage for the system. All of these under $1,500. And then for the other system, you have the PC where you are overspending your money. You have an i5 13600K, which requires more cooling. Then you have a 240 all-in-one liquid cooler from Corsair, a well-branded Gigabyte Z790 Aorus Elite motherboard, 32 gigs of DDR5 memory from Corsair, a 1TB Gen 3 SSD from Samsung, an RTX 4060 Ti, 8GB version for the graphics card, because that's the maximum budget we could go with, because remember, this is a $1,500 system. And then you get an NZXT H5 Flow, the same power supply from NZXT as well, and then I also added 3 extra fans from NZXT because the case only comes with black fans. The total price for this system is again under $1,500, slightly cheaper than the other PC, but here you are losing 75% performance on average when it comes to gaming. And if you don't believe me, take a look at this test. This is from TechSpot at 1080p on high to ultra settings in high demanding titles such as Cyberpunk 2077, The Last of Us Part 1, Alan Wake 2, and these type of games which are very high demanding. The 4060 Ti was able to average 98 FPS and the 4070 Ti Super over 160. You can see that the difference is huge. And then if we jump up in resolution to 1440p, the 4070 Ti Super was able to average 124 FPS while the 4060 Ti 68. This is a massive difference, because if you have a 144Hz monitor, the difference between 68 FPS and over 120 is a lot. And then jumping up to 4K, if you want to play at 4K resolution on the line, the 4070 Super was able to average 70 FPS, which can be even faster if you turn on DLSS, which is the upscaler from Nvidia, or if you lower the settings to high instead of ultra in high demanding titles. And then the 4060 Ti was able to average 37 FPS, which is not even playable at 4K, especially since you get 8 gigs of VRAM instead of 16 gigs from the 4070 Ti Super. And then let's not talk about ray tracing, because on a 1440p resolution ray tracing test, on a 10 game average, the 4070 Ti Super was able to average 86 FPS, which is a very nice number considering you have ray tracing enabled. And then the 4060 Ti was able to average 40 FPS. So once again, not even playable, and that is the power of not overspending in your system. If you need free personal PC help from me, you can DM me. You will have the instructions in the video description. And if you want to see the best gaming PC build for every budget and every resolution, you will have that video in the top right of the screen. Thank you guys for watching, thank you for the support, and I will see you on the next one.